Let me ask you something, and I need you to be honest with yourself. When was the last time you went to bed feeling like you actually finished everything you needed to do? Not just survived the day, not just checked off the bare minimum, but truly, deeply felt like you gave your best hours to the things that actually matter to you. If you're sitting there right now thinking, I can't even remember, then listen carefully, because what you're about to hear might be the most important thing anyone has ever told you about productivity, time, and how your life actually works. And no, it has nothing to do with waking up at 4 a.m., nothing to do with cold showers, nothing to do with another color-coded planner collecting dust on your shelf. This is the story of Marcus, and honestly, it might as well be the story of you. It was almost 9 p.m. on a Friday night. Gate B7 at O'Hare International Airport was packed. The kind of packed where every single charging outlet is taken, where people are sitting on the floor with their backs against the wall, where the coffee shop line stretches past the bookstore. You know the scene. You've been there. Marcus was 28 years old. He worked at a mid-sized digital marketing agency in Chicago. The kind of job that sounds impressive at dinner parties, but slowly eats you alive Monday through Friday. He had his laptop bag over one shoulder, a half-empty cold brew in his hand, and that specific kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from physical labor. It comes from a brain that never stops running. His flight to Denver had been delayed by 2 hours. He dropped into a seat near the window, pulled out his phone, and did what he always did when he had a spare moment. He opened his to-do list. Wake up at 5:30 a.m., gym before work, read 20 pages, finish the client proposal, learn Google Analytics, record a podcast episode, start the online course, meal prep on Sunday, call mom, fix the budget spreadsheet. The list was so long that just looking at it made his chest tight. Here's the thing about Marcus, and maybe about you too. He wasn't lazy, not even close. He was the guy who bought the planner, downloaded the apps, watched the productivity videos at 2 times speed, highlighted the books, and still felt like he was falling behind every single day. He had ambition. He had goals. What he didn't have was the energy to chase any of them after the world was done draining him dry. He closed the to-do list, leaned his head back against the seat, closed his eyes, and whispered something to himself that he would never say out loud to anyone. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. But here's where the story takes a turn that Marcus never saw coming. And honestly, neither will you. The seat next to him had been empty, but when he opened his eyes, a man was sitting there, late 50s, silver hair neatly trimmed, simple clothes, a dark jacket, no brand name, no logo, the kind of man you'd walk past 100 times without noticing. But there was something about him, something in his face, a calmness that didn't belong in an airport full of stressed, delayed, frustrated travelers. He was reading a small leather notebook, and he was smiling, not at anything in particular, just smiling, like he knew something the rest of the terminal didn't. Marcus glanced at him, then went back to his phone. He opened Instagram, scrolled for about 90 seconds, closed it, opened his email, read 2 lines, closed it, opened the to-do list again, stared at it, closed it again. He was doing that thing. You know that thing, where you pick up your phone, open something, close it, then pick it up again 30 seconds later. Not because you need to, but because your brain doesn't know what else to do with itself. The man next to him spoke without looking up from his notebook. That phone won't give you what you're looking for. Marcus turned. Sorry? The man closed his notebook and looked at Marcus with the kind of eyes that have seen a lot of life and made peace with most of it. I said, your phone won't give you what you're looking for. You've picked it up 4 times in the last 2 minutes, and every time you put it down, you look more tired than before. Marcus let out a small laugh, the kind you give when a stranger says something uncomfortably true. Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to get something done, but my brain won't cooperate. The man nodded. How long has it been like that? Like what? Feeling like your brain is running on empty, like you have 100 things to do and 0 fuel to do any of them. Marcus stared at him. How did you know that? The man smiled. Because I spent 15 years of my life feeling the exact same way. His name was Ray. He was 58 years old, retired now, used to run operations for a logistics company, traveled a lot, read a lot, thought a lot, the kind of man who had earned his calm the hard way. And that night, sitting in a delayed airport terminal with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and boarding announcements echoing through the hall, Ray told Marcus something that would crack open his entire understanding of how life works. Let me ask you something, Ray said. If I gave you 30 hours in a day instead of 24, would all your problems disappear? Marcus didn't even hesitate. Absolutely. Ray shook his head slowly. No, they wouldn't. Marcus frowned. Why not? Let me paint you a picture, Ray said. He leaned forward slightly, the way people do when they're about to say something they really mean. Imagine it's Saturday. You got the whole day off. No meetings, no emails, no one expecting anything from you. 16 beautiful open hours stretching out in front of you like an empty highway. Sounds like paradise, right? Right. Now imagine you wake up that Saturday morning with a splitting headache. Your body aches. You barely slept. Your stomach is off. You feel like someone drained your battery overnight. Marcus said nothing. How much of that perfect Saturday are you actually going to use? Probably none of it. Exactly. Ray leaned back. And why? You had all the time in the world. The schedule was wide open. Nothing was stopping you. Except I had no energy. Ray pointed at him. Now you're getting it. He paused, letting that sink in. Then he said something that Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. The world has been lying to you, Marcus. Everyone talks about time management. Books, podcasts, seminars, apps, all of it screaming at you to manage your time better. But here's what nobody tells you. Time is not your problem. Energy is. Now, I need you to sit with that for a second, because this might be the most important shift you ever make in how you think about your day. You've been taught your entire life that the problem is time, that if you could just wake up earlier, stay up later, squeeze more hours out of the day, you'd finally catch up. You'd finally get ahead. You'd finally feel like you're enough. But think about your own life. Think about those days when you had plenty of time and still got nothing done. And think about those rare days when you were locked in, focused, on fire, and you accomplished more in 2 hours than you normally do in 2 weeks. What was different? It wasn't the time. You had the same 24 hours both days. It was the energy, your mental energy. your emotional energy, your physical energy, the invisible fuel that determines whether your brain runs like a sports car or a broken lawnmower. That's what Ray was trying to tell Marcus, and that's what I'm trying to tell you right now. Marcus was quiet for a long time. The airport noise faded into the background. The announcements, the rolling suitcases, the crying baby 3 rows over, none of it mattered. His mind was doing something it hadn't done in months. It was actually thinking, not scrolling, not reacting. Thinking. So, he said slowly, if energy is the real problem, how do I fix it? Ray reached into his jacket and pulled out the small leather notebook. He opened it to a specific page and turned it toward Marcus. On the page were 3 simple lines written in neat handwriting. 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. arrow peak. Focus. 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. arrow. Lowest energy. 6 p.m. to moderate focus. Marcus looked at it. What is this? My body's map. Your what? Ray smiled. About 10 years ago, I did something very simple. For 1 full week, I tracked my energy. Not my time, not my tasks, my energy. Every 2 hours, I asked myself one question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how sharp does my brain feel right now? He tapped the notebook. After 7 days, a pattern appeared, clear as daylight. My brain was sharpest in the early morning. It crashed after lunch, and it had a small second wind in the evening. Once I saw the pattern, I changed everything. Changed everything how? I stopped fighting my body and started working with it. Here's what Ray explained, and pay close attention because this is where most people go wrong, and it's probably where you're going wrong too. Before Ray discovered his energy pattern, he used to do what everyone does. He'd wake up, get to the office, and start with the easy stuff. Emails, quick replies, phone calls, filing paperwork, organizing his desk, little tasks that felt productive but didn't actually move the needle on anything important. By the time he got to the hard stuff, the strategic thinking, the big decisions, the creative work, his brain was already running on fumes. And then he'd wonder why everything felt so difficult, why he couldn't focus, why he kept procrastinating on the things that mattered most. Sound familiar? It should, because Marcus was doing the exact same thing. And there's a very good chance you are too. Marcus sat there in that airport chair, and for the first time, he saw his entire daily routine from the outside, like watching a movie of his own life and finally understanding why the main character kept losing. Every morning, he'd arrive at the office, brain fresh, alert, ready to go. And what would he do? Open his inbox. Spend 90 minutes reading and responding to emails. By the time he was done, his sharpest hours were gone. Burned on. Messages that could have waited until 2 p.m. Then he'd try to work on the important stuff. The big client pitch, the campaign strategy, the creative brief. But his brain was already half dead, and the work that should have taken 2 hours would stretch into 6. And at the end of the day, he'd look at his to-do list and feel like a failure. Not because he didn't work hard enough, because he spent his best energy on his smallest tasks. I've been putting premium fuel into the wrong engine, Marcus said quietly. Ray nodded. Now you understand. Let me make this personal for a second, because I don't want this to be just Marcus's story. I want this to be your wake-up call. Think about yesterday. Think about the first 2 hours of your workday. What did you actually do? Did you check your phone, scroll through notifications, reply to messages that weren't urgent, sit in a meeting that could have been an email, chat with a coworker about nothing important, browse social media for just a minute that turned into 30, and then later, when you finally sat down to do the real work, the work that actually moves your career forward, the work that feeds your dreams, how did your brain feel? Tired, foggy, distracted, heavy, and you blamed yourself. You called yourself lazy, undisciplined, unfocused. You told yourself you needed more motivation, more willpower, more coffee. But the truth is, you weren't broken. Your timing was. You were spending your sharpest hours on tasks that deserve your dullest ones. And you were saving your most important work for the time when your brain had nothing left to give. That's not a discipline problem. That's a design problem. And design problems have design solutions. The boarding announcement finally came. Flight 472 to Denver, now boarding Group 2. Marcus stood up, grabbed his bag, and looked at Ray. So what do I do? Practically, starting tomorrow. Ray stood up too. He was shorter than Marcus expected, but there was a steadiness in the way he carried himself that made him seem larger. Here's your homework, Ray said. For the next 7 days, don't change anything about your routine. Don't try to fix anything. Don't add any new habits. Just observe. Observe what? Yourself. Every 2 hours, stop whatever you're doing and ask yourself one simple question. How is my energy right now? Rate it from 1 to 10. Write it down. That's it. That's it. That's it. No big science, no complicated system. Just pay attention to your own body for 1 week. Because here's what I've learned, Marcus. Most people spend their entire lives trying to manage the clock, but they've never once stopped to understand their own engine. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. He typed, "Energy tracking, 7 days. Rate 1 to 10 every 2 hours." Then he looked up. "This feels too simple." Ray smiled. "The best things always do." They shook hands. Ray's grip was firm but gentle, the kind of handshake that says, "I believe in you," without a single word. As Marcus walked down the jet bridge, he felt something shift. Not a dramatic movie moment transformation. Something quieter, something deeper. Like a door in his mind had cracked open just enough to let a sliver of light through. He didn't know it yet, but that conversation in a crowded airport terminal was the first step toward completely reorganizing his life. Not with another app. Not with another planner. Not with another video telling him to wake up before the sun. But by learning something that should have been obvious all along. You don't need more hours. You need to understand which hours are actually yours. Here's what happened next, and this is where it gets really interesting. Marcus landed in Denver late that night. He checked into his hotel, dropped his bag on the bed, and instead of doing what he usually did, scrolling his phone until his eyes burned, he grabbed the hotel notepad from the nightstand. He wrote at the top, "Day 1, Saturday." The next morning, he woke up naturally around 7:30 a.m. No alarm. He noticed something he'd never paid attention to before. His mind felt clean, not perfect, but clean, like a whiteboard that hadn't been written on yet. He wrote, 7:30 a.m., energy, 8 out of 10. Mind feels clear, body rested. He went down to the hotel restaurant, had breakfast, came back up, started working on a side project he'd been putting off for months, a personal blog he'd been meaning to launch. The words came easily. Ideas flowed. He wrote 1,200 words in about 40 minutes. 10 a.m., Energy, 7 out of 10. Still sharp. Slight hunger. By noon, something changed. He was in a conference session for work, and he noticed his attention drifting. The speaker was interesting, but Marcus kept zoning out. His eyelids felt heavy. His thoughts scattered. 12:30 p.m. Energy, 4/10. Foggy. Distracted. Want coffee. After lunch, he tried to review some work documents. It took him 20 minutes to read 2 pages. He kept rereading the same paragraph. 2:30 p.m. Energy, 3/10. Brain feels like mud. But then something surprising happened. Around 5 p.m., after a walk around the hotel and a light snack, he felt a second wave of clarity. 5:15 p.m. Energy, 7 out of 10. Second wind. Feel creative again. He grabbed his laptop and knocked out another chunk of writing. 600 words in 20 minutes. By the end of day 1, Marcus looked at his notes and saw something he had never seen before. His energy wasn't a straight line going down throughout the day. It was a wave. It had peaks and valleys, patterns. And for the first time in his life, he was actually paying attention to them. By day 4, the pattern was undeniable. His peak hours were between 8:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. Every single day, without exception, that was when his brain was firing on all cylinders. That was his window, his golden zone, the hours where difficult things felt possible. After lunch, between 1 and 3 p.m., he was basically useless for anything that required deep thinking. His brain turned into a browser with 40 tabs open and all of them buffering. And in the early evening, around 5 to 6:30 p.m., he got a smaller but real burst of focus. On day 5, he made his first real change. Instead of opening his email first thing in the morning, which is what he'd done for the past 4 years, he blocked his peak hours for his most important project. The client pitch he'd been struggling with for weeks. He sat down at 8:45 a.m., opened the document, and something almost magical happened. The ideas that had been stuck for weeks started flowing. The structure that had felt impossible suddenly made sense. The words came, not perfectly, but they came. And in 2 hours and 15 minutes, he had a draft that was better than anything he'd produced in the last month. He stared at his screen. Then he laughed out loud in his apartment, alone, at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. Because for the first time, he realized something that changed everything. He wasn't bad at his job. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't undisciplined. He had been doing the right work at the wrong time every single day for years. And now that he was doing the right work at the right time, everything felt different. Not just easier, possible. That night, Marcus picked up his phone and typed a message to an unknown number that Ray had scribbled on a napkin at the airport. Ray, it's Marcus from the airport. I found my window, 8:30 to 11 a.m., and I feel like I just unlocked a cheat code for my entire life. 3 minutes later, his phone buzzed. Good. Now the real work begins. Marcus stared at the message. He smiled. Then he typed back, "What do you mean?" The reply came almost instantly. "Finding your energy window is just step 1. Now you need to learn what to protect it from. That's where most people fail." Marcus set his phone down. Outside his window, the city lights of Chicago stretched endlessly into the night. Somewhere out there, millions of people were staring at their to-do lists, feeling the exact same exhaustion he had felt just a week ago. But something inside him was different now. He didn't have all the answers yet, not even close. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was asking the right questions. And that, as it turns out, is where every real change begins. How to Organize Your Life in 1 Month. Part 2. The List That Changes Everything. The Not-to-Do List. A week had passed since Marcus found his high-energy window, and for the first time in years, things were actually working. He was getting more done between 8:30 and 11 a.m. than he used to accomplish in an entire day. Projects that had been sitting on his desk for weeks were finally moving. His boss had even noticed. "Something's different about you lately," she'd said during a team meeting. Marcus just smiled. "But here's the thing about life, and I need you to really hear this. The moment you solve one problem, life hands you the next one. Not because the universe is cruel, but because growth doesn't come in a single lesson. It comes in chapters." And Marcus was about to walk straight into Chapter 2. It started on a Tuesday night. He was sitting at his kitchen table, laptop open, phone buzzing, a half-eaten sandwich next to a cold cup of coffee. In front of him, glowing on the screen, was his to-do list, and it had grown again. Finish the Henderson client pitch, complete Module 3 of the online UX course, go to the gym, read 20 pages of that leadership book, call Mom, meet Jake for dinner, renew his car insurance, clean the apartment, research podcast microphones, reply to 6 personal emails, start outlining the blog post, buy groceries, schedule a dentist appointment. He stared at the list, and the list stared back. And somewhere between item number 7 and item number 13, Marcus felt that old familiar weight settle back onto his chest. The same weight he thought he'd gotten rid of. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. "I don't get it," he muttered. "I'm working smarter now. I'm using my peak hours. So why does it still feel like I'm drowning?" Have you ever felt that? That specific kind of frustration where you know you're doing better, you can see the progress, but the mountain of stuff ahead of you never seems to shrink. You check off 3 things and 5 more appear. You clear your inbox by noon and it's full again by 3. You finish one project and your boss drops 2 more on your desk before you can even celebrate. It's exhausting. Not physically, mentally, emotionally. It's the exhaustion of a life that keeps adding and never subtracting. And that's exactly where Marcus was stuck. His phone rang. He almost didn't pick up. He was tired of screens, tired of notifications, tired of everything that demanded his attention. But then he saw the name on the screen. Ray. He picked up immediately. "Hey, Ray, how's my favorite airport stranger doing?" Marcus laughed, but it came out thinner than he expected. "Honestly, I was just thinking about calling you." "Trouble again?" "Not exactly trouble, more like, I don't know. I'm getting more done than ever, but my list just keeps growing. Every time I cross something off, 3 new things show up. I feel like I'm running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up." There was silence on the other end, not an uncomfortable silence, the kind of silence that means someone is actually listening, actually thinking about what you said instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. Then Ray asked a question that caught Marcus completely off guard. "When you wake up every morning, what's the first thing you ask yourself?" Marcus thought about it. "What do I need to get done today?" "And what do you do next?" I add things to my list. Exactly, Ray said. Every single morning you ask yourself what to add. But tell me something, Marcus. When was the last time you asked yourself what to remove? Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. He had no answer. You free this Saturday? Ray asked. Yeah. Meet me at Lincoln Park, the bench near the boathouse, 8 a.m. Saturday morning, early October in Chicago, the air had that crisp autumn bite to it. Leaves were turning gold and red along the paths of Lincoln Park. Joggers passed in colorful layers. Dog walkers chatted while their golden retrievers sniffed every tree. A group of older women were doing Tai Chi near the pond, moving in slow, graceful unison. Marcus found Ray sitting on a wooden bench near the boathouse, just as promised. He was wearing a simple gray sweater and holding a paper cup of coffee. He looked like he'd been there for hours, comfortable, unhurried, like a man who had made peace with the speed of the world by refusing to match it. Morning, Marcus said, sitting down next to him. Ray nodded. Then, without a word, he reached down beside the bench and picked up a canvas bag. From inside, he pulled out a large glass jar, the kind you'd see in a grandmother's kitchen, used for storing flour or sugar. Then he pulled out a handful of large stones, about the size of golf balls, then a bag of smaller pebbles, then a small container of sand. Marcus stared. What is all this? Ray set the jar on the bench between them. Today, I'm going to show you why your life feels so full and so empty at the same time. He picked up the large stones first. One by one, he placed them into the jar. They clinked against the glass. 5 stones, 6, 7. The jar looked about half full. Then he picked up the pebbles and poured them in. They tumbled and rolled into the spaces between the big stones, filling the gaps. The jar was now about 3/4 full. Then he poured in the sand. It hissed softly as it filled every tiny remaining space. The jar was completely full. Ray looked at Marcus. Make sense? Marcus tilted his head. Not really. Ray smiled. He reached into the bag again and pulled out a second empty jar, identical to the first. This time, he poured the sand in first. It filled the bottom third of the jar easily. Then he added the pebbles. They sat on top of the sand, taking up most of the remaining space. Then he tried to put the large stones in. They didn't fit. He tried rearranging them, pushing them down, tilting the jar. But no matter what he did, the big stones wouldn't go in. There simply wasn't enough room. He held the jar up toward Marcus. Now, does it make sense? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then the corners of his mouth turned up slowly. If you fill your life with small stuff first, there's no room left for the big stuff. Exactly. Ray set both jars on the bench. And that's precisely what you've been doing. Now, let me talk to you directly for a moment, because this isn't just Marcus's problem. This might be the single most common mistake that ambitious people make. You want to do everything. You want to learn the skill, take the course, hit the gym, build a side hustle, read the books, maintain the friendships, impress the boss, call your parents, eat healthy, sleep well, meditate, journal, network, and still somehow have time left over to breathe. And because you're ambitious, because you care, because you refuse to settle, you keep adding things to your plate. Every week, every month, a new goal, a new habit, a new commitment, a new, I should really start doing this. But you never take anything off. Your jar is full of sand, and you're wondering why the big stones won't fit. This is not a time problem. This is not an energy problem. This is a priority problem. And the solution isn't to add more. It's to subtract. Ray reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was worn at the edges, clearly something he'd carried for a long time. He unfolded it and handed it to Marcus. On the paper, in Ray's careful handwriting, were 6 lines. No phone after 10 p.m., no arguing without purpose, no saying yes to everything, no social media more than twice a day, no office gossip, no meetings that don't need me. Marcus read the list twice, then looked up. This is your to-do list? Ray shook his head. No, this is my not-to-do list. Marcus had never heard that phrase before. Your what? My not-to-do list. The things I have deliberately chosen not to do. The commitments I refuse to make. The habits I've intentionally removed from my life. The sand I've poured out of my jar so the big stones have room. He let that land for a second. Then he continued. Everyone talks about what successful people do. They wake up early, they exercise, they read, they hustle. But nobody talks about what successful people don't do. And honestly, Marcus, the don't list matters more than the do list. Marcus leaned forward. But how do you decide what goes on the not-to-do list? Ray pointed at the park around them. Look over there. About 30 feet away, 2 kids were on the playground. One kid was running from the swings to the slide to the monkey bars to the seesaw, trying to play on everything at once. He'd grab a swing, pump twice, jump off, sprint to the slide, go down once, then race to the climbing wall. He was moving constantly, but never actually playing. The other kid was on just one swing, pumping higher and higher, eyes closed, huge grin, totally lost in the moment. Which one is having more fun? Ray asked. The one on the swing. Why? Because he's not trying to do everything. Ray nodded. That's the whole lesson, Marcus. The person who chases every opportunity fully enjoys none of them. The person who picks one thing and goes deep, that's where the magic lives. Marcus was starting to see it. But old habits are like old furniture. Even when you know they don't fit anymore, getting rid of them feels uncomfortable. But what if I miss out on something? He asked. What if one of those things I cut turns out to be important? Ray smiled, like he'd heard this question 1,000 times. Let me ask you something. In the last month, how many hours have you spent scrolling social media? Marcus winced. I don't want to think about it. Rough estimate. Maybe 3 hours a day, sometimes more. That's roughly 90 hours a month. Now, in that same month, how many hours did you spend on your blog? The project you actually care about? Marcus went quiet. Maybe 4 hours. Total. So you gave 90 hours to other people's highlight reels and 4 hours to your own dream, and you're worried about missing out? That one landed like a punch to the chest. Not a mean one, a necessary one. They sat in silence for a while. The park was getting busier, families arriving, strollers rolling past. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing acoustic guitar, and the notes drifted over the water like something from a movie scene you'd want to live inside. Finally, Marcus spoke. I think the hardest part isn't knowing what to cut, it's actually cutting it, especially the social stuff. Saying no to people. Ray nodded slowly. That's the part nobody warns you about. Every yes you give to someone else is a no you're giving to yourself. Most people don't see it that way. They think saying yes makes them kind, helpful, a good friend, a team player. Doesn't it? Sometimes. But let me tell you what happens more often. You say yes to coffee with someone you don't really want to see. That takes 2 hours. You say yes to a meeting you don't need to be in. That's another hour. You say yes to helping a coworker with something they could have figured out themselves. Another 30 minutes. He counted on his fingers. By the end of the day, you've given away 3.5 hours of your life to things that didn't matter to you. And then you sit down at night, stare at your to-do list, and wonder why your dreams are still sitting there untouched. He looked at Marcus with those steady, clear eyes. Every yes has a hidden no inside it, Marcus. The question is, what are you saying no to when you say yes to things that don't matter? That afternoon, Marcus didn't go home. He walked 2 blocks from the park to a small coffee shop on Clark Street. The kind of place with mismatched chairs and handwritten menus and jazz playing softly from a speaker you can't see. He ordered a black coffee, sat down at a corner table, pulled out his journal. On the first page he wrote, "What will I do this month?" He stared at it. Then he remembered what Ray said. He turned the page. On the next page, in large capital letters, he wrote, "What will I not do this month?" He sat there looking at the blank page for a long time. His pen hovered. His brain resisted. Because saying "I will" is exciting. It's aspirational. It feels like growth. But saying "I will not" feels like giving up, like admitting defeat, like closing doors. But then he thought about Ray's jar, about sand and the stones, about the kid trying to play on every piece of equipment at once, and he started writing. No phone after 10 p.m., no social media before noon, no YouTube without a specific purpose, no office gossip, no saying yes immediately, always take 24 hours to decide, no pointless arguments, no weekend days without a plan. He read the list back, and something happened that he didn't expect. He felt lighter, not heavier, lighter, like someone had lifted a backpack off his shoulders that he didn't even know he was wearing. Here's what I want you to understand, because this is the part that changes lives. We've been conditioned to believe that organizing your life means adding more systems, more habits, more routines, more structure. And yes, some of that matters. But the real breakthrough, the one that actually sticks, comes when you start removing. Think of your life like a closet. You keep buying new clothes and shoving them in, but you never take anything out. Eventually, the closet is so packed that you can't find anything. You stand in front of it every morning feeling overwhelmed, even though you technically have plenty of options. The solution isn't a bigger closet. It's fewer clothes, the ones you actually wear, the ones that actually fit, the ones that actually make you feel like yourself. Your to-do list works the same way, your commitments work the same way, your habits work the same way, less but better. That's the whole game. The test came fast. It always does. Monday, office, lunchtime. 4 co-workers were huddled in the break room arguing about some reality TV show. Marcus used to be right there with them, not because he cared about the show, but because it felt weird to not participate, to sit alone at his desk while everyone else was being social. But this time, he smiled and said, "You guys go ahead. I've got something I need to wrap up." One of them laughed. "Oh, look at Mr. Productivity over here. Too good for us now?" 2 weeks ago, that comment would have pulled Marcus right back to the group. He would have sat down, spent 45 minutes talking about nothing, and then felt frustrated with himself for the rest of the afternoon. But this time, something was different. He had his list, his not-to-do list, and it was like having a contract with himself, a quiet promise written in his own handwriting. He smiled, shrugged, and walked back to his desk. It felt uncomfortable for about 10 minutes. Then he finished a task he'd been putting off for 3 days, and the discomfort vanished. That evening, he got home around 7 p.m., ate dinner, washed the dishes, sat on the couch, and at 10 p.m., right on schedule, he reached for his phone. His thumb moved toward Instagram like it was on autopilot. Muscle memory, the same motion he'd made thousands of times before. Swipe up, tap the pink and orange icon, start scrolling, disappear for an hour. But then he stopped. He looked at his thumb hovering over the screen, and he remembered. No phone after 10 p.m. He set the phone face down on the coffee table, picked up the book on his nightstand, opened it. The first 5 minutes were brutal. His brain kept screaming at him. Just a quick check. Just the notifications. Just one scroll. 5 minutes won't hurt. You deserve to relax. You've been working hard all day. Every excuse in the book. But he held the line. He read. At first, the words blurred together. His attention kept drifting. But after about 10 minutes, something shifted. The words started to stick. The story started pulling him in. And before he knew it, he'd read 30 pages, more than he'd read in the entire previous week. He turned off the light at 10:45 p.m., earlier than he'd gone to bed in months. 3 days later, he noticed the first real change. He was falling asleep faster. His mornings felt different, not groggy, not heavy, clearer, like his brain had actually rested overnight instead of just pausing between scrolling sessions. His focus at work sharpened. He was finishing his peak hour tasks even faster than before, not because he was working harder, but because his brain was arriving at the office in better shape. And the biggest change? It came from the most unexpected place, the yes problem. On Thursday, Jake called him. "Bro, let's hit that new bar downtown tonight. You're free, right?" Old Marcus would have said yes without thinking, not because he wanted to go, but because saying no felt selfish, rude, like he was letting someone down. New Marcus paused. He thought about what he had planned for the evening. 2 hours of work on his blog, the project that actually mattered to him. "Not tonight, man. I blocked some time for myself." Silence on the other end. Then Jake laughed. "Block time for yourself? What are you, a CEO now?" "Something like that," Marcus said, smiling. "Catch up this weekend?" After he hung up, he felt a strange pang of guilt, like he'd done something wrong. That feeling lingered for about 20 minutes, but then he sat down, opened his laptop, and wrote the best blog post he'd ever written. 1,200 words that poured out of him like water, and lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he understood something he'd never grasped before. Every time you say yes to something that doesn't matter, you're secretly saying no to something that does. And you don't even realize it's happening. It's invisible, silent. A theft so quiet, you don't even notice what's being stolen until it's already gone. His time, his energy, his dreams, all silently traded away, one unnecessary yes at a time. A few weeks later, Marcus stood on a platform at Union Station. He was heading to Milwaukee for a client meeting. It was early morning. The platform was crowded with commuters, each one locked into their own world. Headphones in, screens glowing, coffee cups in hand. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his photo gallery, old pictures and new ones. His face hadn't changed much, maybe a little less tension around the eyes. But his life had shifted underneath him like tectonic plates. His journal used to be filled with new tasks every day. Now it was filled with things he refused to do. And the strangest, most counterintuitive thing had happened. The shorter his to-do list got, the bigger his accomplishments became. Less noise, more signal, less sand, more stones. He was about to put his phone away when he heard a voice behind him, a voice that by now felt like home. "Looks like the bag is lighter this time." Marcus turned around. Ray was standing there. Same gray sweater, same calm smile, same eyes that looked like they'd already seen the end of whatever story you were living through. Marcus grinned. "The bag's the same, Ray. But up here?" He tapped his temple. "Way lighter." Ray put a hand on his shoulder. "Remember this, Marcus. The greatest skill in life is not doing more. It's making room for what matters. And room only appears when you have the courage to throw out what doesn't." The train pulled in. Doors opened. They walked toward the same car, side by side. And Marcus carried with him a new understanding that had taken root so deep it would never leave. Your life doesn't feel cluttered because you have too much to do. It feels cluttered because you don't have the courage to stop doing what doesn't matter. And the day you learn that, the day you truly learn that, is the day your most important dreams finally have space to breathe. How to Organize Your Life in 1 Month. Part 3. The Invisible Architecture, Environment Design plus Friction. Something was bothering Marcus, and he couldn't figure out what it was. On paper, his life was improving. His high-energy window was locked in. His not-to-do list was working. His to-do list was shorter than it had been in years. His boss had complimented his work twice in the same week, which had literally never happened before. But underneath all of that, a quiet question kept nagging at him. One of those questions that hides in the back of your mind like a splinter you can't quite reach. Why is it working now? He'd tried to change before, many times. He'd set alarms at 4:30 a.m. He'd downloaded habit-tracking apps. He'd bought journals and planners and signed up for courses. And every single time, after about 2 weeks, the whole thing collapsed. The alarm got snoozed. The app got deleted. The journal gathered dust. And Marcus would end up right back where he started, except now with an extra layer of guilt on top. So what was different this time? Was his willpower stronger? No. He still wanted to sleep in. He still craved the dopamine hit of scrolling through his phone at midnight. He still felt the pull of every distraction that had ever beaten him before. Was he more motivated? Not really. He had the same dreams, the same ambitions, the same vague desire to get his life together that he'd had for years. So what had actually changed? If you've ever asked yourself this same question, if you've ever wondered why some habits stick and others don't, why some people seem to have effortless discipline while you struggle to maintain yours for more than a week, then pay very close attention to what happened next. Because the answer isn't what you think. Marcus was on another train, a weekend Amtrak to Milwaukee, this time for a family visit. He'd grabbed a window seat. His journal was open on the little fold-down tray. He was reviewing his notes from the past few weeks, trying to find the pattern. A few rows up, a little girl, maybe 4 years old, was sitting with her mother. The girl was holding a bag of gummy bears. Her mother said, "Not yet, sweetie. After lunch?" The girl obediently put the bag on her lap. 30 seconds later, she picked it up, turned it over, stared at it, put it back down. 15 seconds later, she picked it up again, peeked inside, put it down, then picked it up one more time, her little fingers working at the seal. Her mom gently took the bag and put it in her purse. After lunch? The girl pouted for about 10 seconds. Then she picked up a coloring book and completely forgot the gummy bears existed. Marcus watched this happen and started smiling. Because something about that tiny moment clicked with something enormous. That's when a voice came from behind him. The biggest battle a human being ever fights is always with themselves. Marcus didn't even need to turn around. He knew that voice the way you know the sound of rain on a window. He turned anyway. Ray was standing in the aisle, a small travel bag over his shoulder, grinning like a man who just heard his favorite joke. "Ray, are you serious right now?" Ray laughed and dropped into the empty seat across from Marcus. "At this point, I think the railroad is trying to tell us something. Or the universe has a weird sense of humor." They both laughed. It was the easy kind of laughter that happens between people who've gone past small talk and arrived somewhere real. After a few minutes of catching up, Marcus asked the question that had been eating at him. "Ray, I need to understand something. I've tried to change 100 times before. I've set the same goals, made the same plans, bought the same books. But this time, something is actually sticking, and I don't know why." Ray studied him. "Did you set your alarm this morning?" "Yeah." "Did you want to get up when it went off?" "Absolutely not." "But you got up anyway." "Yeah." "Why?" Marcus thought about it. Really thought about it. Not the surface answer. The real one. "Because I'd already set everything up the night before. My running shoes were by the door. My workout clothes were folded on the chair. My water bottle was filled and sitting right next to them. When the alarm went off, I didn't have to think. I just had to stand up and walk toward the door." Ray smiled, the kind of smile a teacher gives when a student finally solves the problem on their own. "And that," he said, "is the answer to your question." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "You think you got up because of willpower, because you're more disciplined now, because you wanted it more, but that's not what happened." Ray leaned forward. "You got up because you designed your environment to make getting up easy. The shoes, the clothes, the water bottle. You removed every obstacle between your bed and the door. You didn't outmuscle the temptation to stay in bed. You made the path to getting up so smooth that your brain chose it by default." Marcus was quiet. Something was rearranging itself inside his head. Ray continued, "Let me show you something." He reached over and gently took Marcus's phone out of his jacket pocket. Then he stood up, walked about 15 rows down the train car, placed the phone on an empty seat, and walked back. He sat down. "Go get it." Marcus laughed, stood up, walked down the aisle, picked up his phone, and came back. "Okay, done." "How long did that take?" "I don't know, 20, 30 seconds. "Did it bother you?" "Not really." "But what if you had to do that every single time you wanted to check your phone, every notification, every scroll, every mindless pickup? You'd have to stand up, walk 30 seconds, pick it up, then walk back." Marcus paused. "I'd probably stop checking it so much." Ray slapped the tray table lightly. That is the entire science of behavior change in one sentence. Now, I need you to really absorb this, because what Ray was about to explain is the reason most people fail at building good habits and breaking bad ones. And it has almost nothing to do with willpower. It's called friction. Friction is the amount of effort required to do something, and it's the invisible force that shapes almost every decision you make throughout the day, whether you realize it or not. Here's how it works. When something is easy to do, you do it more. When something is hard to do, you do it less. That's it. That's the whole principle. It sounds almost stupidly simple, but the implications are enormous. Think about it. Why do you check your phone 80 times a day? Is it because you're addicted, weak-willed, undisciplined? Maybe. But the bigger reason is that your phone is always within arm's reach. It's in your pocket, on your desk, on your nightstand, next to your plate at dinner. The friction between you and your phone is basically zero. One hand movement and you're scrolling. Now imagine your phone was locked in a box in another room, and every time you wanted to check it, you had to stand up, walk to that room, unlock the box, use the phone, then lock it back up and return. How many times would you check it then? 3 times a day, maybe 4, because you added friction. The behavior didn't change because your willpower changed. The behavior changed because the environment changed. That's what Ray had been teaching Marcus all along. Not how to be stronger, how to be smarter, how to design his world so that the right choices were easy and the wrong choices were hard. Ray could see the gears turning in Marcus's head. He kept going. "Let me ask you something. Do you play guitar?" Marcus blinked. "How did you know?" "I didn't. Lucky guess. But here's my real question. When was the last time you actually played?" Marcus tried to remember. "Honestly, maybe 5 or 6 months ago." "Where's the guitar?" "In my closet, in the case, behind some boxes." "And where's your TV remote?" Marcus laughed before he could stop himself. "On the couch, right where I sit every night." Ray spread his hands like the answer was floating in the air between them. "So every evening you sit down and the remote is right there. Zero friction, one button, and you're watching something. But if you wanted to play guitar, you'd have to get up, open the closet, move the boxes, take out the case, open the case, tune the guitar, and then start playing. And by then, I've already told myself I'll do it tomorrow." "Exactly. It's not that you don't want to play guitar, Marcus. It's that the path to playing guitar has 6 obstacles in it, and the path to watching TV has 0. Marcus stared out the window. Farmland was rolling past. Green and gold fields stretching to the horizon under a pale autumn sky. But he wasn't seeing any of it. He was seeing his apartment, his closet, his couch, his remote, his guitar gathering dust in the dark. And for the first time, he realized that his habits weren't a reflection of his character. They were a reflection of his furniture arrangement. Ray wasn't done. "I had a friend," he said. "Good guy, smart, worked in finance. He told me once that he never drank enough water during the day. He'd get to the evening and realize he'd had maybe 2 glasses. His doctor told him to drink more. His wife told him. He set reminders on his phone. Nothing worked." "What happened?" "I asked him one question. 'Where's your water bottle?' And he said it was in the kitchen, in the cabinet. He'd have to get up from his desk, walk to the kitchen, open the cabinet, get the bottle, fill it up, and bring it back." Marcus could already see where this was going. So I told him, put the bottle on your desk, full, every morning, right next to your keyboard where you can see it and reach it without standing up. And 1 month later, he was drinking 3 liters a day without reminders, without willpower, without any conscious effort at all. He just drank it because it was there. Marcus shook his head slowly. That's almost too simple. That's why nobody does it. We're addicted to complicated solutions. We want the app, the system, the 5-step framework, the expensive course. But the biggest changes in human behavior come from the smallest changes in human environment. Let me put this in terms of your own life, because I want you to walk away from this with something you can use tonight, not next week, tonight. Think about the habit you've been trying to build. Maybe it's reading before bed. Maybe it's working out in the morning. Maybe it's cooking healthier meals. Maybe it's writing, drawing, learning a language, practicing an instrument. Now ask yourself, how many steps are between you and that habit? If your book is on a shelf in another room, that's friction. If your gym clothes are buried in a drawer, that's friction. If your healthy ingredients are hidden behind the junk food in the fridge, that's friction. Every extra step, every extra second, every extra decision between you and the good habit is a tiny wall that your brain has to climb over. And your brain hates climbing walls. Now think about the habits you've been trying to break. Social media, late-night snacking, binge watching, impulse shopping. How many steps are between you and that habit? If your phone is on your nightstand, that's 0 friction. If the chips are at eye level in the pantry, 0 friction. If Netflix auto-plays the next episode, 0 friction. Your brain doesn't even have to make a decision. The bad habit is right there, waiting for you, arms wide open, saying, come on in. So here's the principle. Write it down if you need to. Make good habits easy. Make bad habits hard. Not impossible. Just hard enough that your brain has to pause and ask, do I really want to do this right now? That pause, those 3 seconds of hesitation, is where everything changes. The train stopped at a station. A vendor walked through the car selling snacks, chips, candy bars, sodas. He stopped at almost every row, holding up his tray. Ray watched him pass, then turned to Marcus. If that guy didn't walk through this car, would you have bought a snack? Probably not. Why? Because I'd have to get up, walk to the dining car, stand in line, and buy something. Too much effort. But when he walks right up to you, tray in your face, snack within arm's reach? Marcus nodded. Then it's hard to say no. That's friction in reverse, Ray said. The vendor removed all the friction for you. He brought the temptation directly to your doorstep. And that's exactly what your phone does. That's what social media does. That's what every app on your home screen does. They've spent billions of dollars engineering 0 friction access to your attention. He paused. So the question isn't whether you're strong enough to resist. The question is whether you're smart enough to add the friction back. The train reached Milwaukee. They gathered their things and stepped onto the platform. The air was cooler here. Marcus could smell Lake Michigan somewhere in the distance, that clean, wide-open smell that cities near water always carry. Before they parted, Ray said one more thing, and this was the one that Marcus would end up writing on a sticky note and putting on his bathroom mirror. Discipline is not about fighting yourself. Discipline is about building a world where the fight is no longer necessary. Marcus let those words settle. Then he hugged Ray, not a polite handshake, a real hug, the kind you give someone who has changed how you see the world. That night, Marcus walked into his apartment and looked around, really looked. For the first time, he didn't see his apartment as a place where he lived. He saw it as a system, a machine that was either working for him or against him. And right now, it was working against him. His desk was buried under old mail and receipts. His dumbbells were hidden under the bed. His phone charger was plugged in right next to his pillow. The snack drawer in the kitchen was at eye level, packed with chips and cookies. His water bottle was somewhere in the back of a cabinet. His guitar was still in the closet. He stood there for a moment. Then he smiled. My habits weren't broken. My apartment was badly designed. And he got to work. Charger moved to the living room. Desk cleared. Only his laptop, a notebook, and a pen remained on it. The book he was reading placed right on top of his nightstand. Impossible to miss. Workout clothes folded and set on the chair next to the bed. Running shoes placed by the front door. Water bottle filled and set on the desk. Journal and pen placed on the pillow, so they'd be the first thing he touched when he got into bed. Then came the smartest move of all. He didn't delete his social media apps. That felt too extreme, too dramatic, the kind of grand gesture that never lasts. Instead, he buried them. He moved Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok into a folder, then moved that folder into another folder, then moved that folder into a third folder on the last page of his phone. Now, to open Instagram, he had to unlock his phone, swipe to the last screen, open folder 1, open folder 2, open folder 3, then tap the app. It added maybe 8 seconds to the process. 8 seconds. That's nothing. That's barely the time it takes to sneeze. But those 8 seconds created a gap, a tiny window where his brain had to ask, wait, do I actually want to do this right now? Is this really what I need? And more often than not, the answer was no. He'd close the phone and go back to whatever he was doing. No willpower required, no motivational speech, no discipline battle, just 8 seconds of friction. Within 2 weeks, his screen time dropped by almost 40%. He didn't even try to reduce it. It just happened. The same way Ray's friend started drinking 3 liters of water without trying. The same way Marcus started getting up early without fighting himself. The environment did the heavy lifting. One evening, about 3 weeks into this experiment, Marcus was sitting on his couch. It was 9 p.m. His book was on the coffee table in front of him. The TV remote was across the room on a shelf near the window. He'd moved it there on purpose. He looked at the book, looked at the distant remote, and without any internal debate, without any motivational self-talk, without even thinking about it, he picked up the book. He read for 45 minutes, finished an entire chapter. And when he put the book down and turned off the light, he felt something that he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride, real, earned pride, not the kind that comes from telling yourself you should be proud. The kind that bubbles up on its own because you know deep in your bones that you just chose the right thing. And the beautiful part, it didn't even feel like a choice. It felt like the obvious thing to do because it was the closest thing to him. A month later, his friend Jake came over for dinner. They were eating takeout Thai food on the couch when Jake looked around the apartment and frowned. "Did you hire an interior designer or something?" Marcus laughed. "Why?" "I don't know. Something's different. It looks cleaner, more organized, but not in a try-hard way. Just like things are where they should be. That's exactly right, Marcus said. I didn't organize my life. I organized my space, and my life followed. Jake looked skeptical. That sounds like something from a self-help poster. Yeah, well, it works. Marcus explained everything. The friction principle, moving the charger, burying the apps, putting the book on the nightstand and the remote across the room, making good habits easy and bad habits hard. Jake listened. At first he laughed, then he went quiet, then he said something Marcus didn't expect. Dude, I literally have a treadmill in my spare room that I haven't used in 4 months. You know what's sitting on top of it? What? Laundry? They both burst out laughing, but it was the kind of laughter that comes right before a realization. The kind that says, oh man, I've been doing this to myself the whole time, because that's the truth, isn't it? Most of us have everything we need, the gym equipment, the books, the goals, the desire. What we don't have is a clear path to the good stuff and enough obstacles in front of the bad stuff. We keep blaming our willpower, our motivation, our discipline, our character. But maybe, just maybe, the problem was never who we are. Maybe the problem was always where things are. A few days later, Marcus stood on that same Milwaukee platform waiting for the return train. The evening light was soft and golden, turning the old brick station into something that looked like a painting. He watched the people around him, a teenager glued to her phone, because the phone was in her hand, an older man reading a newspaper, because the newspaper was open on his lap, a young mother talking to her toddler because the child was right there in front of her. Everyone was doing whatever was closest to them, whatever required the least effort, whatever the environment made easy. And Marcus thought about something Ray had told him that day on the train, a sentence so simple it almost didn't seem important at the time. But now, looking at it from the other side, it felt like the most important thing anyone had ever said to him. Behind every habit is not just an intention, there's also a path. And if you want to change the habit, don't just change the intention, change the path. He looked up at the sky. The first stars were appearing, and he smiled because he finally understood something that had taken him 28 years to learn. He'd spent his whole life blaming his weak willpower for his bad habits. But willpower was never the real game. Environment was. Design was. The invisible architecture of his daily life, the placement of objects, the proximity of temptations, the ease or difficulty of every tiny action, that was what had been running the show all along. If the path to a bad habit is smooth, even the strongest person will eventually walk it. And if the path to a good habit is smooth, even an ordinary person can quietly, steadily become extraordinary. He opened his journal and wrote one line. I will stop trying to change my behavior. I will change my environment first. Because when the path is right, you don't have to fight yourself to reach the destination. He closed the journal, tucked it into his bag, and stepped onto the train, ready for whatever came next. How to Organize Your Life in 1 Month. Part 4. The Second Brain. Brain Dump plus Mental Clarity. A few months had passed, and Marcus's life looked nothing like it used to. He was waking up on time because his environment made it easy. His peak hours were protected. His not-to-do list kept the noise out. His apartment was designed to guide him toward the right choices without a daily willpower battle. Things were working, and then life did what life always does when you start to get comfortable. It leveled up. Marcus got promoted, new title, better salary, bigger desk, and a mountain of new responsibilities that made his old workload look like a warm-up. Suddenly, it wasn't just his own tasks anymore. Now he had a team asking questions, clients wanting meetings, his manager expecting weekly reports. On top of that, the regular life stuff hadn't stopped. The electricity bill, mom's prescription, his friend's wedding next month, car maintenance, the online course assignment he was 3 weeks behind on, groceries, a dentist appointment he'd been rescheduling since April. Every single day something new was added to the pile. And here's the part that nobody talks about when they tell you to level up and chase growth. When your life gets bigger, the number of things your brain has to hold gets bigger too. And your brain has a limit that most people don't even know exists until they crash straight into it. Marcus hit that limit on a Wednesday evening. He was sitting on the L train heading home from work. The car was packed. Rush hour in Chicago means standing room only, holding a metal pole, trying not to make eye contact with the guy whose backpack keeps hitting your shoulder. His phone buzzed. A text from his boss. Need the client report by 9 a.m. tomorrow. He started typing a response. Then he remembered the electricity bill. He'd forgotten again. Third time this week. Then he remembered Mom. He was supposed to call her last night. Then he remembered Jake's birthday. Was that today or tomorrow? He couldn't recall. Then he remembered the car insurance renewal. The deadline was Friday. Then he remembered the charger for his laptop. He'd left it at the office. Again. His thumbs froze over the keyboard. He hadn't even finished replying to his boss, and 5 completely unrelated things had hijacked his brain in under 15 seconds. His mind felt like a browser with 40 tabs open, all of them loading at once, and every few seconds another one popped up demanding attention. He got home, ate dinner mechanically, brushed his teeth, lay down in bed, closed his eyes. But his brain wouldn't close. Tomorrow's meeting at 9. The report has to go out before that. Mom's prescription, electricity bill, Jake's birthday, call the mechanic, the course assignment, reply to that email from last Tuesday, buy a gift for the wedding, reschedule the dentist. It was like trying to sleep in a room where 100 people are all talking at once. The noise wasn't coming from outside, it was coming from inside his own head. He finally fell asleep around 1 a.m. When the alarm went off at 6:30, his body had rested, but his brain felt like it had been running all night. Now, I want to pause here, because if you've ever experienced this, and I'm willing to bet you have, I need you to know something. You're not overwhelmed because you're bad at your job. You're not forgetful because something is wrong with your memory. You're not scattered because you lack focus. You're overwhelmed because you're asking your brain to do a job it was never designed to do. Your brain was built to think, to create, to solve problems, to connect ideas, to imagine possibilities. That's its job. That's what it's best at. But somewhere along the way, you turned it into a storage unit, a warehouse for every reminder, every task, every appointment, every half-finished thought, every worry, every "I should probably do that soon" that floats through your day. And here's the problem with using a factory as a warehouse. The more stuff you pile in, the less room there is to actually build anything. That's exactly where Marcus was, and he didn't even realize it until Ray called. It was Thursday evening. Marcus's phone lit up. The name on the screen made him exhale in relief. Ray. "Let me guess," Marcus said, picking up. "You sensed a disturbance in the force." Ray laughed on the other end. "Something like that. How are you? Honestly, my brain feels like it's going to explode. Not because of one big thing, because of 100 small things. I can't stop thinking about everything I need to do. It's like my mind won't shut up." There was a pause. Then Ray said, "If I asked you to carry 100 pounds of grain on your shoulders and walk around the city for 5 hours, could you do it?" "No way." "Why not?" "Because it's way too heavy." "But what if that same 100 pounds of grain was sitting in a warehouse? Not on your shoulders, just stored somewhere safe. Would it bother you then?" "No, it would just be sitting there." "Exactly," Ray said. "That's what your brain is doing right now. You're carrying everything on your shoulders instead of putting it in a warehouse. Every task, every errand, every worry, every reminder. You're not storing them somewhere safe. You're hauling them around with you every second of every day." Marcus was quiet. Ray continued, "And the heavier the load gets, what happens? I slow down. I can't think clearly. I forget things." "Right. And when the warehouse is completely full, is there room for anything new?" "No. So new ideas, creative solutions, clear thinking, they can't get in because there's no space left." Marcus felt something shift. Not a light bulb moment. More like someone had opened a curtain he didn't even know was there. He'd been so busy trying to remember everything that he'd forgotten how to think about anything. "What do I do?" he asked. "Are you free Saturday morning?" "Yeah." "I'll send you an address. There's a coffee shop near Union Station. We'll fix this." Saturday, 8 a.m. A small coffee shop called The Grind, tucked into a side street near the station. The kind of place where the barista remembers your name and the Wi-Fi password is written on a chalkboard next to a quote from someone you've never heard of but wish you had. Ray was already there, sitting by the window, a cup of black coffee in front of him, and next to the coffee, a small, worn notebook. The edges were soft from years of handling. Some pages had coffee stains. The cover was scratched. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't aesthetic. It was used. Marcus sat down across from him. "That thing looks like it's been through a war." Ray picked up the notebook and held it like it was something precious. "This little book has saved my sanity more times than I can count." He opened it and turned it toward Marcus. Every page had small, quick notes scribbled on it, some in pen, some in pencil, different colors, different handwriting sizes, but all of them short, brief, almost like text messages to himself. "Call the insurance company. Blog idea, why systems beat goals. Buy new filters for the coffee machine. Meeting with Tom. Ask about the Denver project. Dentist. Tuesday, 3 p.m. Book recommendation from that podcast. Deep work. Return the jacket. Nothing remarkable. No grand ideas. No inspirational quotes. Just small, ordinary, everyday things." Marcus looked up. "What is this?" Ray smiled. "My second brain." Marcus laughed. "Your what?" "My second brain. Here's how it works. When something pops into my head, anything at all, a task, an errand, an idea, a worry, I don't try to remember it. I don't hold on to it. I write it down. immediately. In this notebook or in a note on my phone, doesn't matter where. What matters is that it leaves my head and lands somewhere I trust. That's it? That's it? Marcus was skeptical. How can something that simple make a real difference? Ray pointed out the window. Across the street, a food truck was parked at the curb. The guy running it was taking orders from a line of about 8 people, and he was writing every single order on a small notepad. "See that?" Ray said. 8 customers, 8 different orders. What if he tried to remember all of them instead of writing them down? He'd mess up, forget someone's order, get things mixed up. Why? Because the brain can't hold 8 separate orders and make food at the same time. Ray leaned back. So he writes them down, not because he's stupid, because he's smart. Writing them down frees his brain to focus on one thing, making the food. He tapped his notebook. That's exactly what this does for me. Every task I write down is one less thing my brain has to carry. And everything my brain doesn't have to carry is more space it has to actually think. Marcus sat with that for a moment. So, it's not about having a better memory. No, it's about needing less memory. Ray pointed at him. Now you're getting it. Let me make this real for you. Because this isn't just a nice concept. This is something that can change how your brain feels by tonight. Think about right now, this very moment. How many things are floating around in your head that have nothing to do with what you're reading? Maybe you need to reply to an email. Maybe you're thinking about what to cook for dinner. Maybe there's a bill you keep forgetting to pay. Maybe someone's birthday is coming up. Maybe there's an errand you promised yourself you'd run this week. Maybe there's an idea you had in the shower 3 days ago that you're trying not to lose. All of those things are sitting in your brain right now, taking up space, using energy, creating a low-level hum of anxiety that you become so used to, you don't even notice it anymore. But it's there, and it's costing you more than you realize. Every unwritten task is a tiny weight on your shoulders. 1 or 2? No big deal. 10? You start to feel heavy. 20? 30? 50? Now your brain is spending so much energy just holding everything in place that it has nothing left for the work that actually matters. This is why you sit down to write and stare at a blank page. This is why you open a spreadsheet and your eyes glaze over. This is why you start a project and immediately get distracted. Your brain isn't empty, it's too full. And a full brain can't create, it can only carry. Ray took a sip of his coffee. Then he said something that Marcus would repeat to himself almost every day for the rest of his life. Your brain is not a warehouse, Marcus. It's a factory. Its job isn't to store things. Its job is to build things. And you've turned your factory into a warehouse. No wonder nothing new's getting made. Marcus felt the weight of that sentence in his chest. Ray pulled a pen from his pocket, grabbed a napkin from the table, wrote on it, "Pick up the book I ordered from the store on Clark Street." Then he set the pen down. Done. Now I don't need to think about it again. I know it's written down. My brain can let it go. But what about important stuff? Marcus asked. Stuff you can't afford to forget. Especially important stuff. The more important something is, the more your brain wants to cling to it. And the more it clings, the more space it takes up. Writing it down doesn't mean forgetting it. It means trusting that it's safe, Your brain lets go when it knows the information is stored somewhere reliable. Marcus thought about last week. He'd had a brilliant idea for a marketing campaign. It came to him in the shower, crystal clear, fully formed. He told himself he'd remember it. He repeated it in his head 3 times. By the time he'd dried off and gotten dressed, it was gone. Completely. He spent the rest of the day trying to retrieve it. It never came back. "I lose ideas all the time," he said quietly. "Good ones." "Of course you do, because your brain is a terrible filing cabinet. It's brilliant at connecting things, recognizing patterns, generating insights. But storing information for later retrieval? It's awful at that. It always has been. We just keep pretending it's not." That afternoon, Marcus went home. He sat down at his desk, opened his journal, and for the first time, he didn't try to organize anything. He didn't make a list. He didn't prioritize. He didn't color code or categorize. He just dumped everything in his brain onto the page. Called the auto shop about the brake noise. Jake's birthday is Saturday. Buy a gift. Electricity bill. Overdue. Mom wants me to visit next month. Check flights. The Henderson report needs the Q3 numbers. Look into that podcast editing software. Cancel the subscription I never use. Reply to Sarah's email from last week. Buy new running shoes. The left sole is peeling. Clean the bathroom. Tax documents. Where did I put them? The blog post about morning routines. Finish the draft. Research standing desks. Dentist. For real this time. He wrote for almost 15 minutes straight. No order, no structure, no beautiful handwriting, just raw, unfiltered brain spillage. Every thought that had been bouncing around inside his skull for days, weeks, some of them months, finally came pouring out. When he wrote the last line, he put the pen down, took a deep breath, and something happened that he absolutely did not expect. He felt light. Physically lighter, like someone had reached inside his head and lifted out a suitcase he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it was there. He looked at the page, all those tasks, all those worries, all those reminders. They were still there. They still needed to be done. But they weren't inside him anymore. They were outside him, on paper, contained, visible, manageable. He actually laughed out loud. Sitting alone in his apartment at 4 p.m. on a Saturday, he laughed because the relief was so immediate and so absurd that he couldn't believe something this simple had been the answer all along. The next Monday, he took the system to work. He kept his phone's notes app open all day. Every time a new task came in, every meeting, every request, every sudden thought, he typed it immediately. Not later, not when he had a free minute. Right then, 5 p.m. Send the revised deck to the client. Ask Lisa about the Q4 budget meeting. Order new toner for the printer. Lunch with a new intern on Thursday. Small things. Ordinary things. But each one written down meant one less thing competing for attention inside his head. And something remarkable happened. His focus sharpened. When he sat down to work on the report, his brain didn't suddenly interrupt him with a reminder about the electricity bill, because the electricity bill was safely written in his notes. His brain knew it was handled, so it let go. When he was on a call with a client, a random thought about buying a birthday gift didn't pop up, because that was already written down too. His brain didn't need to hold it. For the first time in months, Marcus experienced what it actually felt like to think about one thing at a time, and it felt like a superpower. A few days later, Jake walked by his desk at the office. "Dude, you're always scribbling in that app. What are you writing, a novel?" Marcus smiled. "I used to keep everything up here." He tapped his head. "Now I just write it down." "What's the difference?" "Huge. Before, my brain was like a security guard, always on patrol, always watching, always holding. Now it's more like an engineer again. It actually gets to build things instead of just babysitting a to-do list." Jake stared at him. "That's actually kind of deep for a Tuesday." They both laughed. But later that evening, Jake texted Marcus, "I tried writing everything down today. My head feels weird." Marcus texted back, "Weird how?" "Quiet, like something's missing, but in a good way." Marcus smiled. He knew exactly what Jake meant. When you've been carrying noise inside your head for years, silence feels strange at first, almost suspicious, like something must be wrong because nothing is buzzing. But nothing was wrong. Everything was finally right. A few weeks later, Marcus and Ray were on yet another train, this one heading south from Chicago to Springfield. Outside, the last of the autumn leaves clung to the trees. Inside, the car was warm and quiet. Marcus handed Ray his journal. The pages were full now, not with grand plans or ambitious goals, with small, honest notes, daily brain dumps, tiny tasks captured and crossed off, ideas that might have evaporated forever, now safely pinned to paper. Ray flipped through the pages slowly, then he looked up and smiled. "Your brain looks lighter." "It feels lighter," Marcus said. "I used to think remembering everything was a sign of intelligence, that smart people don't need to write things down. And now I think trying to remember everything is the dumbest thing a smart person can do." Ray nodded. "Remember this. If a factory is full of finished inventory piled up everywhere, blocking the machines, covering the workbenches, stacked to the ceiling, what happens? Nothing new gets made." "Exactly. And if your brain is full of small tasks, half-remembered errands, and floating worries, what happens to big ideas, to creative thinking, to the kind of deep focus that actually changes your life? They can't get in. There's no room. So you make room, not by thinking harder, by writing more, by trusting your second brain to hold the small stuff so your first brain can do what it was born to do." The train slowed as it pulled into a small station. A few passengers got on, a woman with a stroller, a teenager with headphones, an old man carrying a newspaper. Ray watched them settle in. Then he turned back to Marcus. "I want you to think about something. Every great invention, every breakthrough idea, every life-changing decision in human history started with a clear mind. Not a busy one, not a stressed one, a clear one." He paused. Newton wasn't answering emails when the apple fell. Einstein wasn't checking his phone when he imagined riding a beam of light. The ideas came because there was space for them to arrive. Marcus looked at his journal, at the messy, imperfect, coffee-stained pages full of mundane tasks and random thoughts. And he realized something beautiful. This little book wasn't just organizing his day, it was clearing the runway for his best thinking. Every grocery list, every errand note, every small captured thought was one more piece of clutter removed from the space where his mind did its most important work. As they neared their stop, Ray stood up and stretched. He looked out the window at the late afternoon light, painting everything gold. "Remember," he said, in that quiet, steady voice that Marcus had come to trust more than almost anyone else's, The day your brain stops working as a memory keeper and starts working as a thought maker is the day your life shifts into a gear you didn't even know existed. He picked up his bag. Because warehouses store what already exists, but factories create what the world hasn't seen yet. Marcus closed his journal, looked out the window, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, his mind was quiet. Not empty, not numb, quiet. The kind of quiet that comes from knowing that everything important is safely written down somewhere he trusts, and his brain is finally, beautifully, free to do what it does best. Think. How to Organize Your Life in 1 Month. Part 5. The Beautiful Mess. Anti-perfectionism plus the 80% rule plus closing. The rain had come and gone. Late autumn in Chicago was turning into early winter. The trees along Michigan Avenue were almost bare now, their branches reaching into gray skies like outstretched fingers. The city had that in-between feeling, not quite cold enough for heavy coats, but cold enough to remind you that something was ending and something new was about to begin. Marcus closed his journal and looked at the last few months of his life spread across its pages. His high-energy window, his not-to-do list, his redesigned apartment, his brain dumps. Each page was a chapter of a transformation that had started with a delayed flight and a stranger who asked the right questions at the right time. He was getting better. He could feel it, and other people could see it. But life, as you probably learned by now, has a very specific sense of humor. Just when you think you figured it out, it slides the next exam paper across the desk. And this one was the hardest yet. It started on a Sunday morning. Marcus woke up with a burst of energy and a dangerous thought. Today, I'm going to make my apartment absolutely perfect. He grabbed his phone, opened YouTube, typed perfect workspace setup, then minimalist room tour, then highly organized desk ideas. 1 video, 2, 5, 8. Each one showed someone's impossibly cleaned space. Books arranged by color, cables hidden, plants perfectly placed, desks with nothing on them except a single monitor and a cup of black coffee. Marcus looked around his own apartment. It was decent, way better than it used to be, but compared to these videos, it looked like a storage unit. Okay, he said to himself, let's do this. He started at 9 a.m., pulled everything out of the closet, then the dresser, then the desk drawers, then the bookshelf. He wanted to reorganize everything from scratch, the complete overhaul, the full reset. By noon, his apartment looked like it had been hit by a small tornado. Clothes on the bed, books on the floor, papers everywhere. Old chargers and cables tangled together in a pile that seemed to grow the more he touched it. By 3 p.m., he was exhausted. The apartment was worse than when he started. Much worse. He didn't have the energy to put everything back properly, so he shoved things into drawers, crammed clothes back into the closet, and stacked books in crooked piles that looked like they might fall over if someone sneezed. By evening, his perfect apartment project had resulted in an apartment that was messier than it had been in months. He sat on the edge of his bed, surrounded by chaos, and dropped his head into his hands. I was trying to make it better. How did it get worse? The same thing happened at work the next week, just in a different costume. Marcus had a presentation due for a major client. He'd done the research, built the slides. The content was solid. It was good, maybe 85% of the way there. All he needed to do was polish a few details and send it. But instead of polishing a few details, he started changing everything. The font didn't look right. He switched it, then switched it again. The color scheme felt off. He adjusted it, then adjusted it 3 more times. One slide had too much text. He rewrote it, then rewrote it differently, then went back to the original version, then changed it again. An animation on slide 7 wasn't smooth enough. He spent 20 minutes fixing it, then noticed that the graph on slide 4 could be slightly better. He rebuilt it from scratch, then realized the new graph didn't match the style of the other slides, so he started redesigning those too. 3 hours disappeared. The presentation still wasn't sent. His manager walked over. "Marcus, the client's waiting." 5 more minutes. 5 minutes became 20. 20 became 45. When he finally hit send, the deadline had passed by almost an hour. His manager didn't yell, didn't lecture, just said one sentence as she walked away. "You don't do too little work, Marcus. You just never let yourself finish." That hit him harder than any criticism he'd ever received, because it was true. He wasn't slacking. He wasn't lazy. He was trapped in something much sneakier than laziness. He was trapped in the belief that everything had to be perfect before it could be done. And perfectionism, as it turns out, is not the opposite of laziness. It's its twin. They both lead to the same place. Nothing gets completed. That evening, his phone rang, and by now you already know who it was. "Rough week?" Ray asked. Marcus laughed bitterly. "Is it that obvious?" "I can hear it in your voice. Let me guess. You tried to make something perfect, and it backfired." "How do you always know?" "Because the only people who sound that frustrated are the ones who wanted everything to be flawless." They agreed to meet the next morning, same place as always, near the station, this time at the old waiting hall of Union Station, with its tall ceilings and wooden benches and that echo that makes every footstep sound important. They sat on a bench near the main entrance. People were streaming past. Commuters, travelers, families, the everyday flow of a city in motion. Ray looked at Marcus. "Tell me everything," Marcus told him. The apartment disaster, the presentation spiral, the font changes, the color adjustments, the deadline he missed because he couldn't stop tweaking things that didn't need to be tweaked. Ray listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, Ray asked a question. "If this train," he pointed at a commuter train idling on the nearest platform, "waited until it was 100% perfect before it left the station, what would happen?" "It would never leave." "Why?" "Because something would always need fixing. A seat might be torn, a window might be smudged, a light might flicker." And yet, Marcus looked at the train. Passengers were boarding, doors were closing. In 30 seconds it would pull away from the platform and carry 100 people to where they needed to go. "And yet it moves," Marcus said quietly. "Because its job isn't to be perfect," Ray said. "Its job is to move, to get people from here to there. And it does that job brilliantly, even with a torn seat in car number 4 and a flickering light in the vestibule." He turned to Marcus. "And your job isn't to be perfect either. Your job is to move, to finish, to ship the work, close the chapter, send the email, and keep going. A finished thing that's 80% good will always beat an unfinished thing that's theoretically 100%. I want to talk directly to you for a minute because perfectionism might be the most socially acceptable form of self-sabotage that exists. Nobody calls you out for being a perfectionist. In fact, people often admire it. "Oh, she's such a perfectionist." It sounds like a compliment, like it means you have high standards, like it means you care more than everyone else. But here's what it actually means in practice. It means the blog post you've been writing for 3 months is still sitting in your drafts because paragraph 4 doesn't sound right. It means the business idea you've been thinking about for 2 years has never been launched because the logo isn't perfect yet. It means you've reorganized your desk 6 times this month but haven't finished a single important project. Perfectionism disguises itself as quality. But underneath, it's fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of making a mistake. Fear of putting something into the world that someone might criticize. And so you keep polishing, keep adjusting, keep tweaking, not because the work needs it, but because finishing means exposing yourself to the possibility that it's not good enough. And while you're busy perfecting, the world keeps moving. Deadlines pass, opportunities close, other people ship their imperfect work, learn from the feedback, and improve. And you're still on version 17 of slide 3, wondering if the font should be 11 point or 12. That's not excellence. That's a prison made of your own standards. Ray reached into his pocket and pulled out an old watch. Silver case, leather strap, worn and slightly cracked. Small scratches on the glass face. It wasn't a luxury watch. It wasn't pretty. It looked like it had lived a full life. "Does this watch tell time?" Ray asked. Marcus glanced at it. "Yeah. Accurately. Looks like it." "So does the fact that it has scratches make it useless?" "Of course not." "Then why do you look at every scratch on your own work and decide it's not good enough to share with the world?" Marcus had no answer, because there was no good answer. There was only the uncomfortable truth that he'd been treating small imperfections like fatal flaws. In his work, in his apartment, in himself. Ray put the watch back in his pocket. "Perfection is a beautiful word, Marcus, and that's exactly what makes it dangerous. It's the prettiest trap in the world, because it always tells you the same thing: not yet. You're not ready yet. It's not good enough yet. Just a little more, just one more fix, just one more pass." He leaned forward, and before you know it, your whole life has been spent getting ready, and you never actually started. Across the hall, a little boy was sitting on the floor with his father, trying to put together a toy train set. The pieces were plastic. Simple. But the boy's small hands kept fumbling with the connections. The first attempt, the tracks went crooked. He laughed, tried again. Second attempt, one piece popped off. He laughed again. Third attempt, the track held. He pushed the little train along it, making engine sounds with his mouth, completely delighted. Ray nodded toward the boy. What if he'd given up after the first try? He never would have built it. But that's what adults do. We try once, it's not perfect, and we quit. Or worse, we don't even start because we're already afraid it won't be good enough. Marcus watched the boy push his crooked, imperfect little train around its crooked, imperfect little track. And the kid was beaming. Pure joy. Not because it was perfect, because it was his. Because he made it. Because it worked, even if it wobbled. And Marcus realized that somewhere between childhood and adulthood, He'd lost that. The ability to be proud of something imperfect. The willingness to build something messy and love it anyway. The courage to say, it's not perfect, but it's done. And that's enough. I want to give you a rule, Ray said. Call it the 80% rule. Marcus leaned in. If something is 80% good, it's done. Ship it, send it, post it, submit it, move on. The remaining 20%, it'll get better over time, with feedback, with practice, with iteration, but only if the first version actually exists, only if you had the courage to put it out there. But what if people judge it? Marcus asked. What if they find the mistakes? Ray gestured toward the far end of the station. A janitor was sweeping the floor. Steady, unhurried strokes. The floor wasn't sparkling. It wasn't museum-quality clean. But it was clean enough. People walked across it without thinking twice. "Does that man need to make this floor shine like a mirror?" Ray asked. "Or is it enough that people can walk comfortably?" "It's enough." That's what organization is, Marcus. That's what good work is. It's not about making something flawless. It's about making something functional, something that works, something that serves its purpose. You're not building a museum. You're building a life, and a life doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to move. Marcus thought about his apartment, about how he'd tried to arrange every book in a perfectly straight line, every pin pointing the same direction, every shirt folded with military precision, and how 2 days later one book would lean, one pin would roll, one shirt would wrinkle, and instead of fixing just that one thing, he'd throw his hands up and stop organizing altogether. Because in his mind, if it couldn't be perfect, it wasn't worth doing at all. And that, he realized, was the trap. The all-or-nothing mindset. The idea that 100% is the only acceptable standard and anything less is failure. It sounds like ambition. It feels like discipline, but it's actually the fastest route to giving up. Because perfection is impossible. And if impossible is your standard, then quitting is inevitable. But 80% is achievable. 80% is sustainable. 80% means your desk is clear enough to work. Your closet is organized enough to find what you need. Your presentation is good enough to communicate the idea. Your apartment is clean enough to feel calm. Not perfect, enough. And enough, Marcus was learning, was more powerful than perfect could ever be. They walked out of the station together. The late morning sun had broken through the clouds, casting long shadows across the pavement. The city hummed around them, taxis honking, people laughing, a street musician playing something soft and blue on a saxophone. Ray stopped at the corner. He looked at Marcus the way you look at someone you've watched grow, not with pride exactly, with recognition, like seeing a seed you planted a long time ago finally breaking through the soil. "Marcus, do you remember the first time we met? Gate B7, O'Hare. My brain was completely fried. And what did I tell you? That time wasn't my problem. Energy was. And then? That I needed to know what not to do, not just what to do. And then? That my environment was shaping my habits more than my willpower ever could. And then? That my brain wasn't a warehouse. It was a factory, and I needed to stop filling it with inventory and start letting it create. And now?" Marcus smiled. "That done is better than perfect, and 80% is enough to change a life." Ray put both hands on Marcus's shoulders, looked him in the eye, and said the last thing he would say in this chapter of their story. Remember this: organizing your life is not about doing more. It's not about having the perfect system or the perfect routine or the perfect plan. It's about 5 things. Know when your energy is highest and protect those hours. Know what to stop doing and have the courage to stop. Design your space so the right choices are easy and the wrong ones are hard. Get everything out of your head and onto paper so your mind can think instead of carry. And let go of perfect, because perfect is the enemy of done, and done is the only thing that actually changes your life. He squeezed Marcus's shoulders, then let go. 1 month, Marcus. That's all it took. Not to become a different person, but to start seeing clearly. Marcus walked home alone that afternoon. The streets were busy, but he felt a stillness inside that he hadn't known before. Not emptiness, fullness, the kind that comes from understanding finally how your own life works. He thought about all the years he'd spent chasing productivity hacks and morning routines and motivational videos, all the planners he'd bought, all the apps he'd downloaded, all the 4 a.m. alarms he'd set and snoozed and felt guilty about. None of it had worked, not because the advice was bad, but because he'd been trying to fix the wrong things. He'd been trying to manage time when the real issue was energy, trying to add habits when the real issue was subtraction, trying to build discipline when the real issue was design, trying to think harder when the real issue was writing more, trying to be perfect when the real issue was being done. 5 lessons, 1 month, a lifetime of difference. He got home, sat at his desk, opened his journal, and on a fresh page he wrote, "This month I learned that 1. Energy comes before time. Protect your peak hours for your most important work. Everything else can wait. 2. What you don't do matters more than what you do. Build a not-to-do list. Guard it fiercely. 3. Your environment is stronger than your willpower. Make good habits easy. Make bad habits hard. Stop fighting yourself and start designing your world. 4. Your brain is a factory, not a warehouse. Write everything down. Free your mind to think, not to remember. 5. Done beats perfect. Every time. Ship at 80%. Improve later, but ship. He closed the journal, set it on the desk, looked around his apartment. It wasn't perfect. The bookshelf was slightly uneven. There was a coffee ring on the desk he'd forgotten to wipe. One of the plants on the windowsill was leaning sideways, and for the first time, that was completely fine. Because the apartment worked, his life worked, not perfectly, but functionally, meaningfully, honestly. And that was more than enough. Outside the window, the sun was setting over Chicago. The sky was painted in shades of amber and violet. Somewhere, a train was pulling out of Union Station, carrying strangers to new cities and new chapters. Somewhere, a man named Ray was probably sitting by a window, reading his little leather notebook, smiling at nothing in particular, and in a small apartment on the north side, Marcus sat in the quiet golden light and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the kind that comes from having nothing to do. The kind that comes from knowing exactly what matters, doing it at the right time, in the right way, and letting everything else go. Because that's the real secret to organizing your life. It was never about doing more. It was about understanding yourself deeply enough to do less, but better, to spend your best energy on your biggest dreams, to say no, so your yes actually means something, to build a world that pulls you toward the right choices, to trust a piece of paper with your thoughts so your mind can breathe, and to let go of the lie that everything has to be perfect before it counts. 1 month, 5 lessons, and a life that finally made sense, not because it was perfect, but because at last it was his.